All right, everybody. Welcome to tonight's webinar. Let's get started here. Looks like we still have some people rolling in, so I'll do some filler talk first few minutes just to make sure nobody misses anything important here. But tonight's talk is distance racing tips, sponsored by Navionics tonight, which is awesome, so a shout out to them. A little bit about myself before we begin, just some filler material. My name is Jenna. I grew up on the East Coast of New York, sailing dinghies most of my life through college, where I transitioned into bigger boats offshore, moved out to San Diego. I actually work as a naval architect out here, still sailing big boats most of the time, as well as I-14s, so a little bit of a contrast there. And I teach part-time for J-World Performance Sailing, everything from basic learn to sail classes up through advanced racing, U.S. Sailing Level 3 certified, and I also work as a sailing specialist for Navionics. That's kind of why I'm here tonight doing this webinar, just to represent the brand and try to get as much information and new learning experiences out there. So let's jump into things here. So goal of tonight. So there's so many seminars and webinars and lessons on weather and navigation. So I really wanted to try to make this webinar a little bit different. So take the other route, the other side of things that kind of get overlooked a lot of times as you're prepping for your distance race. So that side of things would be boat preparations, crew preparations, some tips while you're actually sailing the race, things to consider, night sailing. And I really want to just try to get you thinking about ways that you can run your boat efficiently as well as your crew efficiently, so you can combine those skills with your weather and your navigation routing to hopefully take home some trophies. So outline for tonight, we'll start with boat prep. So some pretty basic stuff, but maybe some things you haven't really thought through or thought of at all before. So hopefully some new things there. Going into crew prep, and you'll see a theme by the end of my slides that communication and getting your crew involved is a very big thing. Keeping them motivated will really pay out in the long run for you. So we'll go through some crew prep, ways to get them involved in stocking everything on board, maintenance, things like that, as well as addressing what they need to bring for the race, those sorts of things. And then we'll move into sailing the race, and we'll talk a little bit about tactics for boat speed, how much do little differences in boat speed really affect you in the long run. And then, like I said before, keeping your crew involved and aware. We'll talk a little bit about watch systems, and then we'll move into night sailing, and we'll finish up with some questions and answers. And I'm actually going to pause right there. So you have on the top of your screen there, you've got a few options. There's a Q&A and a chat, and the raise hand option. So I kind of ignore those as I'm talking, and apologize for that. But at the end of my talk, I'll go through and I'll answer any questions in the Q&A and in the chat. So you feel free to use either one. The raise hand doesn't give me a pop-up, so I don't actually see when you raise the hand. I'll just see it at the end. So go ahead and just type in through the Q&A section or through the chat. All right, so first slide here is kind of my most Navionics-based marketing here. So boat prep. You've picked the race you want to do. You kind of know the course. You'll start to get your notice of race, your sailing instructions, things like that. You're going to start to gather your information on weather and your tides and your currents, your local knowledge and all of that. And you're going to start to formulate your game plan. And if you have a specific navigator on board, they're going to be studying their charts. They're going to be studying the weather really in depth. And that's kind of the whole side of things that I'm not going to talk about tonight. But one question to consider is, will you have communications on board? And does the race allow you to get communications? Maybe it's a coastal race and you'll have cell phone signal. You can be getting updated group files every so often. Does the race allow it is the big question. And then along those lines, my Navionics plug is, if you have the app on your phone or the app on a tablet, you can access your tides and your currents and some local weather data without having to carry your Eldridge Tide and Currents book around with you. So the Navionics app is pretty versatile for that. Allows you to save some weight, not carrying around all different types of equipment. And then the second bullet point I have here is to load your waypoints into your nav system and or your tablet. So primarily you'll be running off of a boat-based nav system. You can run your tablet as a backup. Some people use the tablet as the primary, purely preference-based. I like the tablet, or the using both, so the nav system down below and the nav station. As you write your logs, you have access to everything there. You can run your tablet up on deck, pass it around, let your crew really see what's going on, where they are in the course, things like that. But my note here is to load those waypoints before the race, before the day of, before the day before, maybe the week before, because as tasks start piling up and things you need to do, this is really going to be at the back of your mind, but you don't want to be doing it on the way out to the race course. So once you know the weather, as we get closer to the race, you're going to have better weather predictions for what you're going to see. You're going to start to make your game plan, and then you need to prep your gear. So first step, prep your sails. If you know it's going to be a really light race, maybe 5 to 10 knots, you know you're not going to be throwing up your number 4 head sail, put that at the bottom of the stack, or take it off the boat if you're allowed to. Try to stack efficiently so that your crew's not moving things out of the way every time we go for a maneuver, every time you go for a sail change. So try to think through your game plan, the sails you'll use most often, get those on top of the stack. Think about fore and aft locations of your gear, your heavy gear. So, maybe you'll keep your spinnakers up in the forward locker, but keep your spare head sails in one of the farther back cabins so that you can get them up on deck through the cabinway without having to disturb sleeping people if you're on a watch system, things like that. Then think through tools and equipment. So what tools are you going to need to access constantly, or what tools are you going to need to access really quickly when something breaks and chaos breaks out? Maybe you don't use your files all that often, so either take them off the boat or shove them in the back and bring maybe your spare line or your spectra or your sheaths up closer into your bunks or into your containers. And then what tools do you want to keep on deck? At the minimum, I would say a marlin spike and a knife. There's probably a lot more stuff you can keep up on deck, but I'd say those are the first 2 that you should be thinking about. And then, depending on your boat, you're bringing along anywhere between 6 and 20 plus people who are all going to be bringing bags on board and gear and sleeping bags. Think through where they're going to store their gear. Most of the time it's the bilge or under the bunk, but you don't want to be storing other things there and taking up their space. So once you've thought through all of that, we'll then move on to food prep, food and water prep. So you know how long the race is. If you don't have a water maker on board, try to spec out, minimum drinking water for X amount of days for X number of people with some spare. You also want to think about emergency rationing, so putting water in your ditch bag. If, God forbid, you have to abandon ship, you want to make sure you have some water with you, because most of the time your solar stills will break after a while. And then for food, longer races require more stores, dehydrated foods, things like that. Shorter overnight races or weekend long races, you can still have the quality of good hearty food, but I would recommend going simple. So you really want the focus to be on sailing. You don't want to have 4 crew down below preparing your dinner and your breakfast and everything like that. So what I would recommend is make meals ahead and either reheat them on the boat if you have an oven or some way to do that, or foods that can be eaten cold. So pasta salads, breads, sandwiches, cereals. I sailed on a boat before that made chicken cutlets, and we would just bring a garbage bag full of chicken cutlets with us and eat those for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, basically. That was an interesting one. And then I personally am a fan of freeze-dried foods. Some people hate them, though. So that's kind of a thing. As you're preparing your foods, try to survey your crew, see who's really opposed to certain options, who doesn't care so much, and try to tailor a little bit so that everybody can have sufficient calorie intake. And then the next bullet there is think about the nighttime munchies. So, we're sailing 24 hours here. If the weather's up, you're burning through a lot of calories. When it hits 2 a.m., it's always good to have a little snack, keep you going, keep you awake, because you'll get tired as the sun goes down, even if you've been sleeping. So cookies, candy, caffeine, hot drinks are really good. And then in line with that, think about how you're going to heat up those drinks. Are you going to have a jet boil on board where you can just boil water really quickly? Do you have the weight allowance and the space for an electric kettle, or maybe you have a stove on board and you can boil right on your burner? The easiest option for overnight races and things like that are just thermoses. Boil the water at home, heat it up, put it in the thermos. It'll stay hot for most of the race, or at least through the night, which is really what you need. All right, moving into crew preparations. So again, I'll harp on this a lot, but getting your crew involved. So as you prep the boat, bring your crew down, get them to help out. Have them, a lot of the times more hands is better. Sometimes if they're not as experienced, it could be a little bit of a hindrance. But if you take the time to teach them on your first distance race, they'll know for other races down the line, and they'll be really helpful. So things like winch maintenance, checking over halyards, and just inspecting lines on the boat, going through your systems, making sure your engines are prepped, your fluids are in the right levels. Every little bit and piece of thing that you can think of that's on your to-do list, try to get at least a few crew members down to help you out. So not only will this help kind of just get them more involved and, just that mindset that they're part of the team, ready to go, but it'll get them familiar with all the systems and all the gear on board. So when you go, hey, I need this, maybe those few people that were helping you out know where that tool or that piece of gear is down below, and it's not just you running around all the time to try to fix things. And then the next bullet point there is share the route information with your crew. So I've gone into some races. When I was first starting out, I was basically on board for rail meet. Didn't really know what was going on, just did what I was told. And found it, the more and more I tried to interact with the navigator and helmsman, the more and more I was learning about what was going on, and I could prepare myself for upcoming maneuvers and things like that. So ahead of time, once you load your waypoints into your nav system or your tablet, or your SIs come out and they'll have the course listed, you give someone a 10-page paper, they're not going to look through and read the course information. If you give them a picture, they know exactly what's going on. So if you can take a screenshot of kind of your general route, doesn't even need to be exact, but just something to kind of get them thinking about what they're going to be sailing into, what maneuvers they're going to face ahead of time. And easy ways like that, the Navionics app, you can plan out your route, take a screenshot of it, email it, print it, hold a pre-race meeting, just show a chart, point to where marks are going to be, which direction you're going around them, even sometimes is a big question. So yeah, just the more you can get your crew involved, the more they're going to want to push the boat hard and keep sailing fast. All right. Second slide here on crew prep. If you're the type of boat that mostly sails weekend regattas and not a lot of distance racing, it's pretty likely that some or most of your crew on board has never had the opportunity to go to a safety at sea seminar, or really probably even considered, what happens if. So U.S. Sailing, at least on the West Coast, holds a fair number of safety at sea seminars in the spring as distance races start to ramp up. I'm sure the East Coast does a very similar scenario. You can look on their website. Google would probably be your best bet there. But aside from that, even just reviewing all of the equipment on your boat and all your systems and the procedure that you want to follow will be so helpful if that event ever happens where you have to abandon ship or something. So make sure your crew knows where the life rafts are, where the flares are stored, ditch bags, food rations. If you're going to take those, they should be probably stored together. Fire extinguishers, and then fuel shutoffs for both your main engine and any gas you use for the stove, so any propane you have on board. In line with that, if something happens, there's going to be a lot of chaos. Whoever is down below is probably going to make your mayday call. A good tip is to print out instructions of exactly what you need to say, fill in the blanks with your boat name, the number of people you have on board for the race, so that all they have to do is read from that and they don't miss any important information. Okay, so the somber part's over. We'll now move back into crew gear prep. So what I like to do when I get on a boat, depending on the race, is kind of split my gear into a critical and a long-term. So the critical are things that I'm going to access daily throughout the day. So sunglasses, hats, base layers as you get into the night, gloves, hats, water, toothbrush, any medication. So that's something that's going to be, depending how cold it is, I can stuff it into a 5-liter dry bag, 10-liter dry bag, 20-liter backpack style, and I'll just clip that to my lee cloth or somewhere near the bunks. So that's something that I can go down and I can grab whatever I need, put it back in once I'm off watch, those sorts of things. That stays near my sleeping vicinity through the race. And then the long-term bag is going to be the things that either I don't need to touch during the race, that, you know, maybe I'm sailing somewhere and I need some shore clothes when we get there, or some team gear for the regatta party. Pack all that in a bag, stuff it in the bilge, below the bunks. Probably won't touch it. Maybe it's got a change of clothes or some additional base layers if the weather gets really cold. Maybe I'll grab it once. But that's kind of the out of sight, out of mind bag. And then if you're a boat that's concerned with weight on board, think about what items you can share amongst the crew to start to cut down on weight. So things like sunscreen, toothpaste, wet wipes, all a good idea. So, you know, if you're sailing with 15 people on board and everybody brings a jumbo size sunscreen, that's a lot of extra weight that you don't need. So if you just buy, you know, one big bulk Costco pack of sunscreen that can serve the entire crew for the race, then you're good to go and you've cut down a fair amount of weight there. Okay, so now we'll switch into sailing the race. We'll start with some general tips here. And the first bullet, again, deals with just getting your crew involved. So don't have just the afterguard in the know, spread the knowledge forward. So yes, you as the boat owner and the navigator and the helmsperson are going to know what's going on. But, you know, maybe your bow people or just your general body weight, your rail meet, or your trimmers will kind of know what's going on, but not to the full extent. So I recommend that during watch changeovers, if you're in a watch system, or just set, you know, like a dinner time meeting where you talk about upcoming decisions, route options that you're weighing, maneuvers that they need to be prepping for, either in their mind or just prepping gear for. Anything you can think about to get the crew involved, discuss it at those times. Like I said before, you can run a tablet up on the deck that has the waypoints, and, you know, you can even have GPS tracking. And it kind of just lets the crew know, you know, oh, we're about an hour out from our next jibe or our next tack. So, you know, maybe I should start thinking about what I need to do or what my role is in that jibe. On longer races where you're getting skeds or boat positions, kind of boat placement in the race, or any tracking information, you can have a small whiteboard down below, and you can just update, you know, who are your top 3 leaders, what gains have you made in the last however long, usually 4 hours, average boat speed, whatever information you get in that sked you can post on the whiteboard. And that just, you know, motivationally, you can start to get into watch wars where, you know, the one watch that was on during the sked maybe made it X distance, the next watch will try to push even farther. So you can get some good competition that way amongst the crew. And then, yeah, the last bullet, keeping everybody involved will lead to a more motivated crew. They're going to want to work harder for you, sail the boat faster. The next bullet here is kind of food for thought. So depending on the race, you know, you could have a lot of maneuvers, a lot of sail changes with the weather. Before you jump the gun and make a decision, really weigh your options. And especially as you're getting into nightfall, you really want to minimize unnecessary sail changes. So things to think about is this wind shift permanent? Is it temporary? You've looked at the weather files, you've analyzed everything. You know that if it's predicted to be 15 to 20 and it drops to 10, you know, maybe that's just a night lull if you're inshore. Maybe it'll pick up a little bit again if you move offshore a little bit. So things to consider to help prevent crew fatigue and help minimize boat speed losses. You know, if the wind's building and you're sailing with your number 1, maybe instead of dropping from your number 1 to your number 2, and then 3 hours later dropping down to your number 3, you know, maybe you can hold off a little bit with your number 1 and swap straight to the number 3, and just save the crew that one sail change. So not only will they be less tired, less maneuvers, but you'll save a little bit of time. Unless you can do a peel, you'll be sailing for a while without a head sail while you put the number 3 back up. And then your crew needs time to adjust to the new sail shape, how the boat reacts with that sail. So every time you make a sail change, you're going to lose boat speed, you're going to lose time, and depending on the race, those can be precious minutes. Whoa, not really sure what happened there. Okay, yeah, so really think about ways you can minimize if you need to. And it all comes down to weather and kind of predictions and where you see the wind going. And the last bullet there is maneuvers are typically much slower in the dark, so you can't see very well. A lot of times it's hard to hear because you have so many things going on and you're not really facing anybody. Things get a little bit frantic at night. So can you maybe hold off your sail change until the sun starts to rise? Or the converse of that is, if you're about to go into nightfall, maybe you should make your sail change a little bit earlier and just kind of help your crew out a little bit. Okay, so let's get into boat speed. The next few slides here are going to be kind of math-based, so I apologize if anybody loses me. But the first one here is, how much does sailing just a tiny bit faster pay off in the long run? And the answer is quite a bit. So my example here is, suppose you want to sail 120 miles. Your race course, total distance there. If your boat averages a very exciting 5 knots, sailing 120 miles will take you 24 hours. So that's just your simple distance formula right there. Distance divided by speed will give you your time. Okay, so what if we increase our boat speed by 2%? So 2% of 5 knots will go up to 5.1. So if now we're sailing 5.1 knots instead of 5 knots, our time to finish is going to be 23.5 hours. So by increasing by 0.1 knots, we're cutting 30 minutes off of our overall time. And if we owe boats time, or if boats owe us time, that 30 minutes could become the make or break as to whether we walk home with a podium position or not. So the takeaway is a small gain in speed over a long distance has a really big influence on your finish time. And this example is the positive example. You're going faster, you're finishing sooner. But what if you were going 5 knots and maybe your trimmers aren't really on their game or your helmsperson is distracted? Maybe you're going 4-point-something knots, 4.9. So it's going to take you longer to finish. So just a little bit of speed change will really throw off your finish time. So with boat speed comes the question of VMG and kind of sailing off your course to try to increase your speed even though you're sailing the longer distance. So advice that's been passed down to me is that courses with shorter legs will often play out better by just sailing your run line. So the reasoning behind that is that there's more opportunity to be gained by sailing the shorter distance, since any big wind shifts that are going to come in and develop during that leg aren't going to develop fast enough to really give you that push, that benefit that you need. So those outlier boats, the boats that go far left and cruise off into the middle of nowhere, hoping for that little bit of a wind shift, that wind change, the shorter the course, the less likely that is to happen. So shorter courses, probably better to sail the run line. On longer legs though, it might do you better to sail a little bit more of a distance off on a different angle and go faster. And yes, you're covering more distance, but if you're making up your VMG, you'll actually get there sooner. So your VMG is your velocity made good. And that's kind of your straight line speed or your run line speed, you can think of it. So if you're sailing to maximize your VMG, you're kind of going off at an angle. So you are making progress towards your mark, but you're also tracking off to the side of it. So at some point, you're going to have to consider your tack or your jibe to come back in towards your mark. So you can use polars to try to decide, your new heading, what new speed you need to keep. You can use all that information on board to decide when you want to tack. And then the question of ley lines usually comes up. If you're sailing in a downwind, your ley lines are going to be pretty wide. So you'll probably take that course offset for a long time before you hit the ley line. So you have to think about what wind shifts are there. Is it worth going all the way out there? Or maybe just a few shorter jibes, staying close to the run line. So this picture I have down on the bottom here, we have our VMG is our speed along the run line from between our two marks, our two red marks, start and finish. We've decided to sail some angle offset. to increase our boat speed or increase our VMG, but we end up with some cross-track error right here. Okay, so if you have your waypoints in your nav system, most likely your instruments will output your VMG for you, which makes your life pretty simple. But if not, you can use some simple algebra, make a table of different headings and speeds, and what speed you need to maintain a VMG for the straight line distance. So the math behind that, I tried to put on this slide, and it's kind of your basic middle school. Cosine is your adjacent vector over your hypotenuse. So what we have here, try to get some annotation. So we've got our original speed on the run line, which will be our adjacent vector. We have our course offset angle, which is our theta. And then our hypotenuse is the necessary speed to maintain a VMG. So what speed do we need to go to get to the mark faster? Or at the equivalent speed, and then if you go faster than that, you'll get there faster. So hopefully the example down at the bottom helps. So if we're sailing 5 knots along the run line, so if this vector was our 5, what speed would we need to sail to maintain our VMG if we alter our course by 10 degrees? So this course offset angle will be our 10 degrees, and this is what we're looking for right here. So what speed will we sail in this direction will give us the equivalent of sailing the straight line distance. So we'll do cosine of 10 degrees is equal to our 5 knots, our original speed, over whatever necessary speed we need to maintain that VMG. And what we get is 5.078, so just under 5.1 knots. So we know that if we alter our course by 10 degrees and we increase our speed by about 0.1 knots when we do that, we're going to make it to the mark in about the same time. If we go faster than that, we'll make it to that mark faster. So hopefully everyone stuck with me for that. I know math can sometimes be a scary thing, but just remember cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse, and you can use this calculation for a range of speeds, a range of different offset angles, and you can make a table that you can reference really quickly while you're sailing. Okay, so math is over, scary part's done. Let's move into watch system and your different options. So with overnight races, generally you can just push through the race without setting up an official watch system, having anything really organized. And crew will just sleep once the race is finished. So one all-nighter is not too detrimental to your health. But with that said, sleep is still a good thing. So you want to, as much as possible, if you see people, really fatigued, send them down below to nap, keep the majority of your crew up on deck ready for maneuvers. So maybe you cycle 2 down at a time, bring them up. If you have a longer leg where you're just kind of sailing and trimming, no big maneuvers, no big sail changes, you can send a few more crew down below, let them get a quick nap. And then the fallback is always crew can sleep on deck. So that gives you the benefit of they're up there, they're dressed in their fallies, they're ready to go if you need a maneuver, but they still get some time to sleep, albeit probably not very good sleep. The next type of race coming up is like the short multi-night race. So probably something over a weekend, you leave Friday, you finish Sunday or Monday. So the best option for this I've found on a few different boats that I sail on is to do kind of a power rotation watch system. So you're keeping the majority of your crew up and you're cycling just 2 to 4 crew down below so that they can get longer sleeps. And then on longer legs, rotate some more down so that they can catch up on sleep. And then this kind of feeds into the longer races, but as the weather builds, the crew's gonna be working harder, they're gonna get fatigued faster. So maybe, if the weather's building a lot, you might want to consider moving into the full watch system. So something where you're doing half crew on, half crew off, let them sleep, let them rest, and be able to sail to their full potential. So the long multi-night races, best practice, go into a full watch system, something like the 4 on 4 off with a dog watch. There's a number of variations. Everybody has their own personal preference. but something where you're letting a bulk of your crew down below to sleep, but you still have crew on board to sail the boat. One note with that is, if you're doing the half and half, don't just make it a cold switch over when the new watch comes on board. Try to overlap 20 or 30 minutes to help ease the transition. So it's interesting, if you track your progress, you can see your watch changeovers through your speed progress, because normally, you change watch, new helm comes on board, new trimmers come on board, and they have to adjust to each other and adjust to the conditions. So the boat will normally slow down for a little bit before they kind of get in the groove and build back up. So if you have the transition, you can have kind of the helms from the previous watch and the current oncoming watch kind of work together a little bit, and the same for the trimmers to keep the boat in the groove, and then the previous watch can go down below and get some sleep. So watch changeover, things to talk about. First off, your oncoming watch, before they come up on deck, before they get dressed, someone should pop a head up and, kind of analyze what's going on with the weather. Is it raining? Is it really cold? Maybe there's a nice warm breeze coming through, so that you can dress appropriately. The worst is to have the crew down below get all kitted out, come up on deck, watch changeover, the next watch goes down below, and then everybody right at the same time gets really hot. They all go down below to take off layers, and the helm and one trimmer are left on deck to handle the boat. So you really want to make sure that when you come on deck, you're prepped for the conditions that you're going to face. Other things to talk about are wind speed and direction. Those should be pretty apparent. Any changes to your plan, your upcoming maneuvers, any weather variations or wind shifts over the previous watch. So that'll help the new crew, the new watch, determine whether shifts are persistent or maybe just a temporary shift, and they'll kind of shift back if they know the trends that have been happening in the last 4 hours. During a watch itself, you want to make sure to rotate positions. So don't have someone trim for all 4 hours or someone on the helm for all 4 hours. When you're helming through waves, your shoulders are going to get really fatigued, your elbows are going to start to hurt. Admit when you've had enough and swap out so that the boat can stay on top of the game, or run through a rotation where you switch positions every 30, 40 minutes. When you go for a helm changeover, some other topics to discuss are what compass headings are you steering towards, what's your true wind angle that you're steering, wind speed and trends that the helm is seeing, and then probably the biggest thing is to get a feel for your trimmers. So surfing down waves, as you come off the backside, the boat's going to pick up speed, your apparent wind angle is going to go forward. Are the trimmers just oversheeting to compensate for the apparent wind angle shift forward, or are they playing the sheet constantly easing and trimming back in? So that's something you usually get a feel for. Work together with your trimmers, keep the boat in the groove, keep the boat going. All right, night sailing. This can sometimes be the dreaded thing, but I actually enjoy night sailing, so this is kind of my favorite slide here. At night, keep trimming, keep the boat sailing fast, keep working hard, and you'll get big payoffs. So the nighttime is when everybody starts to get tired, starts to back off, starts to get distracted, think about other things. It's dark out, you can go to sleep without anybody really noticing. But really keep the communications going, keep the crew interacting with one another, keep it kind of lively, keep the boat going, push hard. So generally, sun goes down, you're going to be steering and trimming towards numbers. So you trim toward an apparent wind angle, but in some cases the helm won't be able to steer, the perfect course. So you're just going to be trimming to your helm, but that makes life difficult when you can't see the sail. So one good option is glow fast sail tape. So you can see in the picture there, you just get glow in the dark striping, draft tape striping. So that can help your trimmers visualize, see what's going on with the trim, see what's going on with the sail shape, and try to keep trimming like they're trimming in daylight. The third bullet down here is more for the helm. So, as you're helming at night, there's not really anything to look at besides maybe your compass and your instruments. So you really want to tune into your senses. Get a feel for, as the waves overtake you, try to steer the boat, get the surf down, and really you should be able to sail your boat with your eyes closed is what I was told is the goal of a really good helm. So keep the boat under your feet, anticipate the motions that are coming up. And then the last few are kind of general maintenance things. So before nightfall, you want to try to prevent gear failure. I mean, really at any time of day you want to do this, but swapping out gear, swapping out equipment at night is much harder. So before nightfall, take a walk around the deck, inspect lines, inspect pulleys, inspect cars, everything that you can, and try to replace anything that's worn or looks like it might break very soon so that you're not having to do any of that in the middle of the dark. And then prepare for the unexpected gear failure because, you know, in some cases it's inevitable, it will happen. So have your tools ready, have your repair kits easily accessible. If you've been running maneuvers throughout the day, running sail changes, swapping gear, doing things, down below is going to become a mess. So really make it a point to, you know, after you do something, clean up, put your tools away, put your equipment away, so that when you need it again, you know exactly where it is. The next bullet there is when you come up on deck at night, have your headlamp. You know, somebody always forgets it, but when you need to go forward and, you know, check leach tension on your head sail, having your headlamps can be really helpful. And then also have a spare flashlight near the helm for those people that do forget it, or if everybody's up forward, maybe the helm can hold the spotlight in the back to kind of give them a little extra light, help them out. And then the last bullet here was kind of an add-on from the previous, is try to minimize unnecessary sail changes at night, just because it's so much harder and you'll lose so much boat speed by doing it. And so that's all I've got for you tonight. I hope you guys took away at least a few points, a few food for thought items that you can start thinking about and implementing into your next big race. Thank you for joining us, and if you're interested in any more upcoming webinars, there's a number on fishing. I've got a few other more racing tune webinars coming up the last Thursday of every month, or second to last Thursday of every month. And then there's a few other more cruising related webinars from one of the other sailing specialists. So take a look on the webinar schedule on the Navionics website. If anything interests you, go ahead and register. If you really enjoyed this and you want to watch it again, the recording will be posted up to the Navionics website in the next few days. It can sometimes take up to a week, but it'll be up there eventually. And I will take any questions if anybody has any. Oh, and last comment, if there's anything you think of after this webinar, any questions you have, or any very specific applications, maybe your boat specifically, feel free to shoot me an email. I'm usually pretty good at replying, unless I'm out on the water or something like that. Sometimes it'll take me a few days. So feel free to give me an email and I can try to answer your questions, or if I can't answer a question tonight, I can email you back with a good answer. No questions? Does that mean I did an awesome job? All right. Well, that's everything. Oh, here's a question. Oh, good job. All right. All right. Well, if you come up with any questions or have missed anything, feel free to shoot me an email. Otherwise, have a great night and hope to see you back at one of my webinars soon.